Hey guys, Kinggath here with Bethesda Mod School, and in this lesson I am going to show you how to convert existing NPCs into settlers, or into potential settlers I should say. So I've created a little thing using the scripts I've shown you guys so far in previous lessons to be able to convert a settler to, or convert an NPC to a settler by using a recruit option on them. Now this isn't particularly immersive because, as you'll see, it's just a little option that pops up on them to recruit them.
What do you want?
Bypass her greeting here, but you can see just a recruit option comes up, and we get our list of settlements. I only have Sanctuary right now, and she will immediately start wandering over there. And I set the same thing up for Patrick here, and now we've got ourselves 2 settlers. Now it could be a lot more involved. For example, we could set it up so that they respond and say something like, sure, I'll head over, or something like that. It's one of the lines that they've already got recorded. And perhaps we could set it up so that there was a condition that checked to make sure that that you'd actually done a quest for them or whatever. But this to me seemed like it would be a really cool feature and a good use of the scripts we've already written in the previous one. So this would be something that I think my audience would appreciate, given that I came into prominence due to settlement stuff. All of you guys are probably here following me because of that. So this is something I've always wanted to see more of in the game, of being able to earn access to random people to become settlers, so you can kind of rehome them rather than them living in destitution and wherever they happen to be. You can give them a nice home in the fancy settlements you're building. So to me, this just seems like it's an awesome avenue for people to expand on. So I thought I would turn this into a tutorial. Now we're going to go ahead and fast travel over to Sanctuary and probably fast forward time a little bit. And then I'll show you guys that you can indeed assign them to things. All right, we are in Sanctuary, and I've set up a few sim settlements plots, and you can see that Patrick here is working a farm, and that we've got Trudy here assigned to a guard post. With the rules of sim settlements by default, I couldn't build a shop in a quick little test, so we don't have any way for her to be a shopkeeper, but she could do so because these 2 characters happen to be voice acted by the generic cast of characters that Bethesda use, so they do have all of the settler lines, which is pretty cool. And turns out that a large portion of the NPCs in the game are like that, and so it's really, really easy to convert them into settlers. So we're going to head into CK now, and I will show you guys how to do this. And a lot of the stuff I'm going to show you would apply to your own custom NPCs too, if you were looking to make NPCs that could become settlers. But we're just going to cover the basic setup of what I actually just showed you there, where you actually just recruit them with the push of a button, and then if you guys want to expand on that by adding in quest tie-ins or making them say things, you can do that with other tutorials I've done or will do in the future. All right, so we're in the creation kit, and a lot of what I did to pull that off is stuff that you guys have already seen me do in past Mod School tutorials. So I'm just going to show you the stuff that's in particular different, and then I'll kind of go broad strokes over the other stuff, since you already know how to do it if you've been following along from my series. If you haven't been, go check out the scripting series, because that is where a lot of this information came from, as far as creating the perk that we'll need and the controller quest that adds the perk to the player when they load the game. So I've got Trudy set up already in this particular build of it, and I want to show you how to set up Patrick. It's identical to Trudy, but you can basically do this to any NPC. But before I show you the steps for making them a settler, I want to show you how you determine if they're going to actually have settler dialogue, because if they don't, it can be a little awkward. It's still functional, and they can still work as a settler, because they actually don't need any dialogue to be a settler. There's a system that Bethesda built in to make the player say things if you make them a shopkeeper. So, for example, if you make an NPC without the appropriate dialogue to be an armor salesman, the player instead will say, let me see what equipment you have, or something along those lines, and then it will just open the barter menu. So you can actually do this even without characters that have the workshop dialogue available. But there's one step in this process where it's good to know if they will have that settler dialogue. So to check that, all you do is go to their traits tab of the NPC. So we went to actor, searched up the actor we want, opened up their record, and then on the traits tab, you'll see that there's the voice type section here. And all of these ones here that are male Boston, male even tone, male ghoul, male old, male rough, all these male generic type names here, and then the same with female, those are the voices that Bethesda uses for most of the characters in the game. And as long as the character you're working with has one of those voices, they will have all the required dialogue for settlers. So if that's the case, then the first thing you're going to do is go to the Factions tab, and go to right click and hit New. and you're going to add the workshop dialogue faction. If they don't have one of those voice types, if they don't have one of the ones that start with the words male or female, one of the very generic ones, and another way you can double check to confirm is to look up the voice type they have. So we could go to, if we go to traits here and look at the name of their voice type, and then if we go to under character voice type and click here and search for that. So if we do male even tone, we can right click on it and hit use info. And just look through this list, and actually we'll sort it by editor ID by clicking on this header here so that we get things in somewhat useful order. And we're going to scroll down until we find ENC, and then we're going to look for ENC Workshop. And as long as you see ENC Workshop under the NPC section here of this use info, that means one of the settlers is using it. So it does indeed, that particular voice does have all of the appropriate dialogue. But for the most part, it's all the ones that start with the word male or female. And if you're wondering if you can double check with one, again, you can search up that voice type here, right click it and hit use info and confirm that it's used on one of the settler NPCs. And it could also be, if you find there might be a few others that are capable of being it, that are using those voices, but they're probably unique NPCs that are already set up like settlers. So if you think about people like Ronnie Shaw or Sheffield, those particular people probably have custom voices, but they also are already set up as settlers. All right, so that workshop dialogue faction, that's an optional one. You might end up skipping that one if they don't have that particular voice, because if you add this to them, the workshop dialogue faction, and they don't have one of the settler voices, then they will end up trying to speak lines they don't have, and it will just be blank voices. So they won't say anything. They'll just either show a subtitle, or if subtitles are off, they'll just appear to get stuck for a few seconds, which isn't great. So only add this workshop dialogue faction if they have a voice type that matches one of the existing settlers. Next, we're going to go ahead and add a few more of these workshop type factions. So we're going to go workshop, and then we're going to type in NPC, and we're going to add the workshop NPC faction. Now for this one, what we want to do is under the rank column, we're going to click on that 0, and then we're going to type in -1 to replace that. And we're going to do that for all the factions we add from here on. And what the -1 means is this particular NPC is capable of speaking the lines that require that faction, but they're not actually in that faction. It's a weird way Bethesda did this. I think it was a hack to make their system that detects which voice files are eligible. That was just how they did it, and they happen to use this -1 for that. It's very confusing to us, but that's the way it works. So we're going to then do the same for all of the workshop vendor factions. So we're going to type in workshop vendor, and there are 6 of those, and we'll do the same thing, -1. And we're just going to go ahead and repeat that for all of these, and we can actually do this a little bit easier way, which I'll show you, is once you have an NPC that already has this set up, you can also grab their faction configuration, right click and hit copy items, and then come in here and paste those in, and you can see we've got those all. So my bet is that a lot of those, or that some of the workshop NPC, so if we search up workshop NPC, just to save you all the trouble, if we go to workshop NPC here, yeah, so you can find all of these here. So we could go ahead, you all will be able to just grab these here, and you could even grab those 2 as well, copy paste, and just remember to set workshop NPC faction to -1 to start, and only keep the dialogue faction if indeed they're in that. Now all the rest of these here, you could potentially add them. It's for example, these Min Radiant, these have to do with the Minutemen Radiants. You could add those as well, and those would allow those NPCs to get selected as the random NPC that gives you a quest. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep it to the bare minimum and to avoid any potential issues. Speaking of issues, one of the potential issues that could come up with you doing this is that NPC might not stay in your settlement depending on what their packages are set up on their AI packages tab. So that might be a problem. I've found that most NPCs, the workshop scripts will override whatever they've got going on, which is awesome. And so this works great. And then you also have to be wary of doing this to NPCs that are part of major quest lines, because this could cause all sorts of problems with their dialogue for their quests, or with preventing them from doing whatever actions they need to do. So be wary of doing this. And once we get into more quest related things in the future of these tutorials, I'll definitely be covering how you can condition things based on different quest progress so that you could check in on another quest and make sure that it has proceeded past a point where you'd feel safe allowing them to be recruited for things like this. I don't necessarily mean I'll come back to this recruitment demo, but you could keep that in mind when we get to that. And by the time you're watching this, those tutorials might already exist. So definitely search my channel and playlist for Bethesda Mod School to see if there's anything quest related that you could pick up on. But the last step we need to do beyond the setting up all of these factions is we need to add a particular script to the NPC, and it's called Workshop NPC script. So if you already saw that the NPC you started working on had this, then you don't have to do anything. It's already set up to be an NPC or to be a settler. What might not be the case is some of these options might not be set in a way that you want. So we're going to go ahead and set up the bare minimum you need for a settler. So the only thing you actually need is this workshop parent. You can just double click it and select that from the list. There's only one option there. Now, what the next three that you might want to select are these three: be allow caravan, be allow move, and be commandable. We're going to go ahead and set all three of them to true. What you might find on certain NPCs is they will have only some of these to true, or maybe none of them, even though they have that. And those are generally for special NPCs. So Ronnie Shaw, I mentioned, I believe, has none of these set, so that she's technically a settler at the castle, but you can't move her around. You can't give her jobs or anything. But if you wanted to override that, you could come in and do this. So we're going to go ahead and check all of these in. And now these are just full normal settlers once we recruit them. So now the last step we've got to do is set up our method of actually recruiting them. So this is all you have to do whether you're doing a vanilla NPC that you want to edit or your own custom NPC. The only things that are actually required are this workshop NPC script. And that's really it. And then these right here are helpful to get the dialogue stuff working correctly. So without setting any of these up, you will find that they won't speak much dialogue as a settler. So that's what these do, the factions. And then what's actually only needed to make them a functional NPC in a settlement is just this workshop NPC script. So we'll go ahead and hit OK there. And now we're going to set up our perk, which we'll use to interact with them, and our controller quest, which we'll use to give that perk to the player. So we're going to start with our perk. I've already got it set up here, but I'll show you how it's configured. Now, we went over this in a recent tutorial about adding alternate activations to things, but there's a couple of things I want to talk about in this. So first up is on the target tab. Some of these you might be able to guess that you would do, but you can condition this. There's multiple ways to skin a cat here. This isn't the only way to do this, but these are the ones that I felt were most relevant. So the first thing we want to do is confirm that the NPC actually has this workshop NPC script on them. So there's a function called, or a condition called has VM script that we can use to do that. So that's our first one. The next one is we don't want you to try and recruit dead NPCs. So we're going to go ahead and get dead equals 0. We want to make sure they're not dead. Now the last one here, this is one you wouldn't know by default. You would have to have a lot of experience with the workshops to know to do this. And that's has linked ref on the keyword workshop item keyword. So everything that's in a settlement, whether it be a random object you built in workshop mode or a settler themselves, they will be attached to the workbench with workshop item keyword. So if we check for that, do they have anything linked on workshop item keyword? If we say 0, then we do want to show our recruit option. Otherwise, we assume they're already recruited, so we don't want that option to appear. So that's why we have it equal to 0. So these three in combination will make it so that we can recruit them so long as they are not already a settler and that they are not dead, and that they are capable of being a settler. Now, some weird things will crop up with this particular perk, like any of the companions that you haven't worked with yet will have the recruit option immediately because of this. So there might be some additional things we'd want to put in there, like perhaps we add in something like get in faction, and then we do, I think it's called potential companion. Yeah, we say potential companion faction equals 0. So now that makes it so now companions can't be, and you can just keep adding conditions to this. If you find NPCs that you don't want showing up on it to be in this list, you can just add more things to exclude them. You could even do something like get is ID and just select that particular actor and set equal to 0. And that way it will make sure that that particular actor gets bypassed if you find that there are some weird exceptions that are coming up that you don't want this to be on. And so this you can go pretty deep with these conditions as far as how they're set up there. Another thing you might want to do, if you know how to check and set up things for monitoring for, say, quest conditions. So for example, if you wanted to set up to make sure that before Trudy and Patrick were done, you'd have to have that drumlin quest complete, or any number of things where you'd want to make sure a quest was complete first. What you might do is set up a keyword that you set up your own script to add to NPCs as they're eligible, and then you could add that check here. So then you could add a target in here. Does the subject has keyword? There's a condition called has keyword, and check for your custom keyword. And then you would have some other script that you have set up that monitors quests and checks when they're done, and then adds the keyword to the appropriate NPCs. And that way you could combine these two systems and to do something like that. So if you have a little more advanced knowledge, that's something you could do, and that's how I would probably condition something like that. All right, so now let's go into our setup here. So our entry point is activate. This is what I showed you before, and we named it recruit. I've showed you this in another tutorial. Now, to get this particular script set up, the way we end up doing this, I follow the typical pattern that I've shown you guys in a couple other points with fragments, which is I just started by typing x equals 1, compiled it, hit OK, save my plugin. If you want specific details on all the little steps you got to do for setting up these fragments in a good way, check out my previous tutorial on activation perks. But what I want to show you in particular here are two things. Is one, this little if statement of why I did that and what it actually means, and then how I'm able to just call workshop parent here. So once I have my script all set up and I put it inside its own namespace, what I can do on a fragment, and I may have shown this in the activation tutorial, but I'll show it again anyway, is if you go to edit script, you can actually define your own properties down at the bottom here, and you can use the name of a specific script as the type before the property so that you can get direct access to all of the functions that are in that particular script. So we set up a workshop parent script. We named our property workshop parent, and then we would have saved this. Now, you don't want to be editing inside of these, inside this begin end code sections. The CK gets real angry about that. So I did not end up doing that. I ended up adding that stuff in here. So we defined our property in our script, and then if we imagine that this, I just cut that out of there, but if you imagine that this was just, oops, and I need to add an int there, it's going to fail. Yeah. So if you imagine that our script was like this before because it was just a demo, after we compile that, after we edited our script manually to add that property, so to add this line down here, and then we compile, now we can go to properties, and workshop parent will be there, and we can select it from the list, just like we did on the settlers. So now we're able to do this particular script. So now I'm going to walk you through what this particular thing does. So as I mentioned in the previous tutorial on this, AK target ref is kind of this magic variable that's available on perk fragments. And the function is created, checks to see, is this an NPC that was created after the game started? So was it something that was generated by the game engine, not hand-placed by you or the mod author or someone at Bethesda? If they weren't a hand-placed NPC, they're created. And that matters because the game handles permanent NPCs a little bit differently than it handles dynamically generated NPCs. And the workshop parent script needs to know whether or not you're working with a permanent actor, as they call them, or one that it was generated on the fly. And so with this, we can check on that without having to worry about testing for individual NPCs. So we don't need to, go, is Trudy, is Patrick, is etc., checking all the different NPCs we added. Instead, we can rely on this is created function to cover all our bases. So then there are two functions we're using here with workshop parent. They do roughly the same thing. You just have to call them differently because with permanent actors, the workshop scripts need to know about them in a different way. So you can see I used add permanent actor to workshop player choice and add actor to workshop player choice. And they're just slightly different variations on the same functionality. But what this will do is it will pop up on your screen that list of your settlements, and then after you select one, it will do all the background information to assign them. So it's real easy to add a settler and to send them off to the appropriate settlement. You don't have to do much in that regard, so you don't have to do any fancy programming. Bethesda already solved for this. And there's one thing here, note that because our default AK target ref is an object reference type, and these functions are looking for an actor, we can cast an object reference as an actor by doing as actor here. So then we do that, and then we compile all this, and we're now done with our perk. So now our perk is set up. We're going to go ahead and hit OK here. And if I went too fast on any of this or skipped any of these screens, go check out again my activation perks tutorial that will walk you through this. We did that with the deployable terminates, and all of the stuff that I skipped here is done in that particular tutorial. All right, so then the last thing we need to do is set up some sort of method to give the player this. So what I ended up doing is just taking advantage of a script we wrote in a previous tutorial, which is the give player items on mod start, but we made one tweak to it, which we actually made also in that alternate activation, but I'll go ahead and go over it again in case you didn't happen to catch that. And that's that I made one modification to our give item section is we test if the item type is a perk, and if so, we call add perk instead of add item. So we just made that, I made that modification to this template, and then I added it to our little controller quest here, which as you guys know, I set up, well, as I mentioned in a couple of other videos, I always just set them up with priority 30. That's just something I see Bethesda use a lot. Start game enabled, run once, and then we add our script. And then under give items, we set up our perk here by selecting or by adding a new item, selecting perk from the form type, and then picking our perk from the list. We hit OK, and save this, and then you'd go back in the game, which I already showed you at the beginning of the video, and you would suddenly be able to recruit those NPCs. So you guys will be able to use this to basically turn everybody into the game into a potential settler if you wanted to. You should be able to do it with random enemies and NPCs you find out in the world too, even the ones that get spawned on the fly. So you'll find those tend to be the ones that came from these ENC types. Those are the ones that get spawned, but note that these ENCs themselves rarely get placed directly in the game. Instead, these end up getting used on leveled actors. So if you right click on one of these and hit use info, and then do that again on the leveled actor, you'll find the actual NPC that is getting spawned into the world, and that would be the one that you would set up as the workshop NPC. Now, I don't know that I wouldn't recommend necessarily doing this on every NPC in the game. It might cause some terrible script lag because all of a sudden everything would have a script on it. But, you know, maybe if you want to test it for yourself and see how it runs and see, and maybe some other people would want to experiment with you. It might be a mod worth listing to just say now every NPC is a settler. But I'll let you guys play with that. I think it opens up a lot of potential. Likely my next tutorial is actually going to be going over how to make commander and leader cards with some settlements. And then this will be an awesome thing to have in your arsenal to do alongside of that. So, all right, guys, take care and watch out for more tutorials.